Hello and welcome to episode 29 of Off the Bandstand. My name is Christian Wiggs. I am your host. Today's episode is Sam Pankey, an incredibly dynamic bass player here in Austin who you might recognize from many of the weekly live streams from Monk's Jazz. Sam has toured throughout the US and Europe with a wide variety of different genres and groups and was a semi-finalist in the Scott Lafaro Jazz Bass competition a few years back. So let's dive in as quickly as possible. In this episode, we talk about the necessity of being an amicable and attentive collaborator. We also talk about adapting and meeting the moment, whether it is in a studio session or it's just on the bandstand for any number of gigs, and a wedding band gig that should have been smooth sailing, but ended up becoming a nightmarish loop that seemingly would never end. So stick around to the end to catch those stories as always. Now, we plugged this record a couple weeks ago, but I wanted to make sure to have an honorable mention. Convergence came out on December 31st of 2020, so right here on New Year's Eve a couple weeks ago, and that is from Sam Pankey, Sean Giddings, Carter Arrington, and Daniel Dufour. We talked a little bit about this record and another record called Silsby that we plugged a few weeks back that Sam was involved with, but it's really worth revisiting and supporting. So if you want to go and get a physical copy of that, you can go over to danieldufour.com. And then if you want to support the other projects that Sam is involved in, you can go to sampankey.bandcamp.com. I can't say enough great things about these records. Really just some very diverse and meaningful musical pieces that they've put together. So go and support that. But moving on to the official releases of the week, from Thomas Winglinski, who is always putting out stuff. This was from back in 2019. It's called Le Balon Rouge, which is a title that is hard to say and not sound pretentious, but also hard to say and not sound embarrassingly American if you don't do the French title justice. So this tune was inspired by a short film in 1956 by Albert Lamouris, which is by the same title. It translates to The Red Balloon, and if you listen closely to the lyrics and read those on Thomas's Bandcamp, you will see the parallels there. You can support this single directly at thomaswinglinski.bandcamp.com, and of course it's available for streaming as well, and it ended up being the first track on Thomas's record that he released back in the summer of 2020, which is called Adjustments Made. So make sure to go and support all of the stuff that Thomas is doing. I always tell him that I feel like his music puts me in a trance in the best way. It just really feels like a very pure, meaningful form of meditation. So go and support Thomas as much as possible. And also, then the second record that I want to plug this week is from Colin Shook. Of course, you know that name because he curates all the stuff over there at Monk's Jazz. But this is his trio record from 2012. It is called Derivatives, and it is anything but derivative. When I listen to Colin play, I always feel that he has been burdened to tell these visceral stories through his playing. And it always just feels like it comes from the deepest, most sincere, genuine place of his soul. Not to sound too terribly cliche about it, but it's some really stunning work. So go and support this. Colin and I have had many conversations over the past several years that have really stuck with me and both affirmed and challenged the way that I approach my own craft. So he's certainly someone who I think you could get a lot out of his music, whether you are just a avid fan of jazz or if you are a musician as well. You can find that at colinshookmusic.com, and then if you want to buy a physical copy or support the release directly, you can go to colinshook.bandcamp.com as well to go and find that out. And speaking of Colin, the Monk shows that we have every week, we got several of them coming up this week. Tonight is the Jonathan Dees Quintet. That is January 21st, Thursday at 7:30. Go and support that. We plugged it last week a bit. And then the next one coming up is January 24th. That is this coming Sunday, and that is going to be Tommy Howard's SA Town Quintet. So check that out. Tommy Howard, and a phenomenal guitar player here in town, and we've plugged his record, which I believe is called Storybook. I hope I got that right. Several weeks back. Go and check that out as well. And then the next Austin Jazz Society Project Safety Net concert fundraiser show is going to be this next Tuesday, as they are every single Tuesday on January 26th. That is going to be the Jessica Mortensen Quintet. And then finally next Thursday, January 28th, so a week from now, is going to be David Mescatique Trio with guests I'm going to be on that show, as well as Mike Sailors, Fabio Augustinus, David Muscatique, obviously the band leader, and James Suter, one of my favorite bass players in town, just like Sam Pankey. And we're going to be playing a lot of the tunes off of David's new record that he has coming out this summer, or will be recording this summer, that pays a little bit of a tribute and a nod, tip of the hat to Nat King Cole and the Nat King Cole Trio. So anyways, that is all of the releases, all of the descriptions, all of the Monk shows for this week. Go and check them out, tune into them. Just what a time to be living, where we have such incredible music and such incredible events happening from the comfort of our own homes. So go and throw some money their way if you can, and if not, then just enjoy the music and enjoy the art. So now let's dive into this episode. Here is episode 29, Sam Pankey. This is Off the Bandstand. Kind of talking about the idea that a bass player is really almost kind of the most amicable person in the group.
Almost always, yeah.
Yeah, just because whether there's other egos at play or just what have you, whether, usually the bass player is not quote unquote the band leader all of the time, right? So do you feel that the instrument attracts a certain personality that really just has to be compatible with that? Yeah.
It's a good question. I don't know. Because it's like sort of chicken or the egg, did the bass attract me because I'm a nice person, or am I a nice person because I play bass,
Right.
Which I think probably a little bit of both, but not to say that I'm a nice person. I have my own, my own shortcomings or whatever. But also, I've heard some of my favorite bass players in the world that I've met. They're not nice people.
Yeah.
They weren't nice to me at a certain time. I won't say who, but then, it could be the opposite too. So I don't know. I think I will say, if you're a professional musician, and especially a bass player, you do have to learn it. You have to learn how to be amicable and accommodating on and off the bandstand. And also you just have to learn how to be accommodating in life and also in music, especially if you're going to tour, because that's something I learned from like rock and roll people, is that like 8 to 9 times out of 10, the rock and rollers are like people who tour a lot. They don't hire necessarily based on how well you play. They hire how good of a hang you are. I think we've talked about this,
Yeah, that's also a super interesting point, that it really like comes down to like the genre, whether or not it's like the hang over the
dude. Even the genre sometimes can be not a moot point. I've never done like extensive jazz touring, but like the people that I've talked to who will, have agreed like, oh no, mostly it's about the hang, whether or not you're that doesn't mean you have to be out drinking every night. You have to be a part of the life of the party. It just means you have to be like fun and easy to be around.
Yeah.
12 hours a day,
Yeah.
15 hours a day.
Like my brother is in a band called The Oh Hellos. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
Oh, I've opened for them. Yeah.
Oh, what? With which band?
Marmalakes at Stubbs Outdoors.
Oh, weird. I was at that show. So yeah.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
That's so funny, and that's what a great segue. It was something I was gonna bring up just because of the fact that you are like very multifaceted, and I've like watched you do like different stuff with all these different bands, and there's so much to get to. But specifically with that, I was like, oh yeah, his cover photo is like him at stuff. It's like, what was that concert? And now I just want to go back and be like, Zoom.
That's
there. Yeah, man. Talk about some of the most like amicable people of all time.
Very
absolute
nice
sweethearts.
Yeah.
Even though those are all like the most amicable, like sweetheart people in the world, touring with a group of people for, in their case, like months at a time can really start. I mean, it's just like being in a relationship with somebody, right? Just like on a micro scale, because and not even that, like you are like having this really close relationship and bond, like you really start to find out what makes each other tick. And then you
find out the absolute worst of people and the absolute best of people. That's just what happens. And like my goal in those situations is always to just be helpful and available to people, but also be available to myself in those situations, like knowing what I need to be a happy, sane person on the road, because it's so hard, I mean, especially like, and guess what? You're going to have flare-ups. You're going to have like situations where you get mad at each other for stupid things.
Yeah.
So it's not worth beating yourself up over not being able to maintain that level of like good vibes all the time. But I've had to learn what I need to make that happen, which is normally like, don't eat poorly all the time, don't drink too much, and exercise regularly. That's about it. And then I can be a good hang. But outside of that, man, like, yeah, you just got to learn how to you got to learn psychology, basically, knowing how to say the right things at the right time so that it doesn't make people angry or upset.
Right.
Being able to read the room.
Yeah, we talked like really briefly, or not too briefly, like back whenever, and it didn't make it in on like the holiday thing, but you talked about like you were running a lot and like you really like exercise, and you were saying there like that's part of just like keeping like a healthy, sane routine. And I'm curious, like to what extent you were touring or have been touring in the past, and how you balance exercising with that, because most of the time you're in like a van, or I mean, a select few are flying from gig to gig and have an abundance of free time. But like, how do you work that in? I
have a little regiment. Well, I have this like my bandmate Aisha Burns, who plays in Balmorhea with me. She told me about this. It's like 7-minute exercise thing that she does. And it's not like the best thing in the world, but it's basically just like a really quick hit, like high intensity interval training. And you just do like body weight exercises really fast at a pretty increased rate. And it allows you to get in it's not the best thing in the world, but what you get your heart rate up, you work your muscles a little bit, you do all these other things. Mm-hmm. And that saved my life on a couple tours, because you just do that for 7 minutes and then, it's lobby call, time to go downstairs, obviously take a shower, but like the little quick things, man, that has helped a lot. If I'm lucky and I'm really like staying in a hotel or something, and there's like a gym, I'll go to the gym. But the quick stuff really does it, I mean, especially if we're like, have a day off or whatever. And, the part of being on tour is like, if you're not going to see the city you're in, you're doing it wrong, Like it's the whole point, I think. I mean, aside from playing music and getting to do that for a living, but like seeing the world is crucial, you know? So if I can do like a quick thing, like just like a couple of sit-ups, push-ups, lunges, planks, whatever, jumping jacks, get that in, and then be able to go about my day and go see, I don't know, Hanover or something,
Right. Yeah. Man, so to what extent have you toured? Have you done stuff like outside of the U.S.? I mean, you said Hanover, so.
Yeah, I did. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I think. 3 years ago. Whoa. Um, did a pretty big tour with Balmorhea, this band from Texas, where we did like all over Europe and the U.S. Not all over the U.S. We did like 8 shows in the U.S., but they were both like both sides, East and West Coast. And then we did like a month and a half in Europe, which was like, well, I guess it was a month and a half for me because I stayed in Europe after and like just bopped around for a little bit. But we did like, London, Paris. We did Istanbul, which was crazy. We did Germany. We did the Netherlands. We did Italy, Spain, Switzerland, a bunch of places that I'm forgetting. Yeah, that was a fun one. And then we did like a week in Italy, which was like the longest we spent in a single country.
Yeah.
I almost said state. And then we did, a year later, I went on tour with this band, PR Newman, and we did like 2 weeks in Italy. So Italy is like the one place outside of my hometown in Austin, or my hometown in Memphis and Austin, that I've spent the most time in my life. I've spent like a month of my life in Italy.
That's super awesome, man.
Yeah, it was funny.
Well, you go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no. That's it, really.
Yeah, well, I'm also really curious because of the fact that, like, I mean, when I first came to town, I remember being on the way to a gig that, like, we rented a van for, and me and Matt Maldonado were starting to get really close. He was the first person who reached out to me whenever I first got into town, like 2015. And he told me a list of names. I remember being like, I want to get into the scene. Like, I want to know like what's going on. And he gave me a list of names and said, write these down on your phone. And then like, if you can sneak into Elephant Underage, like try to do it. Like just go around town, see where these guys are playing. And I still have the thing on my phone, but your name is on there.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's like, I mean, it's all the usual suspects. It's like Blondell, Mordecai, you, Colin Shook, Daniel Dufour, like all of these people that, I think most jazz musicians, whether they are at the top of the scene, just breaking in, or somewhere in between, really kind of view you with a lot of reverence as like one of the top bass players in town. And I'm not just buttering your bread. I mean, like really, like you have that reputation of just being like this solid player, really, really nice guy. So for you to be going and like playing what I would assume to be like a bunch of different genres, how do you feel that like contributes to the jazz idiom? Or do you feel like it's just this entirely separate thing and you try to like not put the jazz idiom on the shelf necessarily, but you're kind of like, all right, and now I'm like putting this to the side a little bit and I'm going to go do this for my like musical mental health maybe? I don't know, like I'm curious.
Oh, well, thank you. First of all, it's very kind of you to say. Second of all, I guess it depends. I mean, like, I definitely feel like my interest in rock and roll and like other genres of music influences the way I play jazz. I mean, I know for a fact it does because I have specifically stolen things from rock songs or whatever. And like, I've played like bass lines from rock songs or whatever on a genre or on a tune or whatever, and I play with people who like doing that too. I play with Kevin Lovejoy a lot, who like, he'll literally start playing a Radiohead song.
Yeah.
And thankfully I know the tune or something and we can like fake our way through it. So in that sense, yeah, I do borrow from it. I mean, but lately I've been trying to like separate them in my mind a little bit because I've just been thinking a lot about like feel and time and like groove and the way like pop guys or like funk bass players or like rock bass players play time is just way different from jazz. And I've noticed that lately in the sense that like I'll do a recording session. I'm like, wait, hold on. I'm playing way too like a jazz guy right now. I need to relax and like, play less, not so far on top of the beat.
Sure.
So in my mind lately, I've been trying to like separate the two, not make it all just this one holistic musical experience, because they're different, and they require different feels, different attitudes, different tastes, but that's an interesting question. I guess before recently, I never really thought about it as much, just because, it just kind of did feel like a whole. It felt like me, maybe I was a douchey artist about it, but like, I used to like view it as like this, it's my musical output is just so varied. No, it's not. It's just, I like a lot of different shit, but I really, I think it is better to like think of them as different things and like approach them with, turning one side of the brain off or turning like a certain thing off and just like going in and really trying to approach it the way someone who's very like versed in that genre would,
Yeah.
That's what I've been trying to do lately.
Yeah, I mean, the theme of the episode right now is really just like amicable and like observant, aware, right? Of just like because I mean and it's not a trope. I don't mean trope in like the sense of like it's any less valid of a point, but I think the whole thing is people are like, well, we got to serve the music, and to like people outside of music, they kind of see that as kind of like this.
What does that even mean?
Right, but then there is this understanding of like, okay, it does have to be something that's like bigger than just one person, right? It has to be this collective whole. I think that is all the more evident, in my opinion, in like instrumental groups as opposed to singers. And I certainly don't want to be like accused of adding on to the dog pile of like shit that like singers get and being like, singers just add all the attention to themselves. But there is kind of there's a real divide of like singers where it's like, all right, and here's the band and they're doing this and it's just this like nice polished thing. And then the singer just sits on top of it. And then there's, I don't know, like people like, I really like Sarah Gazarek and Jasmine Horn, and I mean Veronica Swift and obviously like Kurt Elling, just these people who really like kind of get down into the trenches, so to speak, with everybody else, and it's just like, no, like we're all creating this like collective whole thing. Like there's even a story from when Kurt was doing the record with the Branford Marsalis quartet and quintet, and Kurt like sang something and Branford was like, or he was like, how do you want me to sing this? And Branford was like, whatever, just do it. And then he did it, and then he was like, don't do it like that.
Right, yeah.
He's like, well, then how do you want me to do it? He's like, anyway, just not that, And so there is that feeling of like, you really have to be an active contributor and like very aware, because it's not necessarily someone's job to tell you how to do something. It's more your responsibility as an individual musician to read the room and match.
We would be so lucky to have, someone like Branford to tell us how to do something, or like someone like, like I'm trying to think of a good example outside of jazz, but I mean, it's so rare. I had a buddy tell me a story about this great bass player in New York, who I'm not going to name him, not because he did something embarrassing, but because I don't know if he wants to be named. But he played this session. He's like an incredible jazz upright player and electric player, but he played some session with like a soul drummer.
Okay.
And like they were like doing this like kind of groove thing, and the soul drummer like stopped them and was like, I'm going to make up a name. Benny, will you come out here with me? Benny, the bass player. And like the drummer and Benny go out the hallway, and she's like, that's all great, your jazz shit, don't do that here.
Whoa.
It was like, and not like he wasn't like overplaying on electric. She was like, look, place the beat like this. Let me play it with me like this. And I was just like thinking, my friend was telling me the story recently, and I was like, I wish someone would tell me that. Yeah. God dang, man. Like that would be great.
It reminds me of like the story of like the early days when Sinatra was doing a thing with Nelson Riddle, like doing studio sessions. And I don't know if you know this story, but like he like, I could correct myself and retcon this afterwards, but if I remember correctly from the biography, Nelson Riddle had written a bunch of stuff where like the horns were doing like a lot of stuff behind Sinatra, and he like pulled him into the mixing booth and was like, "Don't ever write stuff that's like that, like writing over me." And that is a little bit more of like the ego at work rather than being like, "Hey man, just like don't do that." But isn't it funny though how depending on the stature or how qualified we think the person is, like how heavy of a person we think it is, it could go so quickly from like inspiring and such great like wisdom straight to a vibe, depending on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm, I've been through the tough love circuit before, and I've also been through this is borderline not okay circuit before, so I know I've seen it go both ways where someone has been like, just given me the like, hey, look, this is what I need from you and you need to deliver this, or versus the, what the fuck is wrong with you? Excuse my language, but learning, that's to me, and I never lead groups very often, and I also don't play with people very much. I'm pretty selective with who I play with if I am leading a group, so like,
Sure.
Hopefully I won't ever have to tell this or say this, but my favorite qualities of leaders are people who know how to like bring that out of people without doing the tough love stuff. I mean, not to say that like, I hate sounding old right now, but like getting the tough love thing is like just something you have to learn how to do, or have to learn how to receive as a musician. And because it's going to happen, regardless of whether or not you want it to happen, or regardless of how prepared you might think you are, it's going to happen that someone just doesn't enjoy what you're playing. And it may not be because you're playing, it might be something entirely outside of you. It might be just that they're having a bad day. So they're going to want to vent on you for a little bit. And guess what? You're going to have to take it,
Right.
But yeah, that quality of leadership to me is really valuable. Like the ability to get what you need out of a musician it's like kind of the stories of Miles Davis being able to do that. I mean, Miles Davis was a hard ass, and maybe was not necessarily always correct as far as like how he got what he wanted out of his musicians. But, it's like saying a few key words or knowing what to do to get what you want is pretty invaluable,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially whenever like when you're building a group that you're going to be playing with for a long time, it's not just about like, no man, like don't give me two beat, like walk, like that, like being rude and abrasive about it isn't going to help the longevity of a thing. It's really only self-serving enough to get through that specific gig and then to not call the person again. Right.
Yeah. It's either that, or, it is Fred's a bass player who, you get called regardless of whether or not people want to call you. Sometimes you get called by them anyway, because they need you,
Right.
Sometimes it's just learning other people's bag, or learning people's language, or learning their, like, the ethos of that particular scene or whatever. That's pretty, like, a valuable skill to learn as a bass player, or just any musician really. It's just, okay, how do I quickly learn, okay, this guy, when we're playing, when there's, like, this is actually a good story. Kevin Lovejoy's piano player in town, great, incredible piano player. He would, whenever there was dancers at the Elephant Room, like someone would come in and like at the Elephant Room, which is like for the most part a listening room spot, and people just go there to listen. Dancers sometimes will come up and dance to what we're doing, which is cute, whatever. And every time that happens, he looks at me and he's like, well, he doesn't say this anymore, but what he used to say was like, "To feel now," and I was like, okay. And he would always explain later. He's like, "Look, man, like if there's dancers, it's just so much harder to dance to 4, not 2." And that kind of blew my mind when I was younger. I was like, "Oh, you're really thinking about the audience."
Yeah.
You're admirable, you know, and I love that about him. So like I learned very quickly, whenever there's a dancer, switch to feel, regardless of what's happening. I mean, you know, extenuating circumstances, you know, might change that. But for the most part, yeah, like every time there's a dancer on stage or near us, like I switch to feel, and boss is always happy.
Yeah, for sure. And if the dancers are being assholes, switch to 5.
Right, switch to 5, yeah, or just play whole notes. You know, that's what I would
do. Immediately switch to like a rubato ballad, where they're just like, you know,
I pull out my metric modulation bag and I just go crazy. You know, I annoy everyone, and then I never get called again.
Yeah, right. Well, man, I can't say enough good things about the records that you put out with
thank you,
Carter Harrington and Dan Dufour and Damian Garcia. I mean, like Distance, Silsby, Standards, Convergence. I mean, just like I was going to say Holy Trinity, but now it's 4. You know, of just like these really, really fantastic records. And what I'm always like blown away with is and the first 2 that I listened to before going back and doing a deep dive was Standards, and then I guess Silsby, and then now that Convergence has come out, you know, I've been checking out that as well. But it's so varied. Like the album is so varied. It's so well curated, and I'm curious if that came from a place of wanting to make something that was very very varied for you know, to use some alliteration, if it was meant to be, you know, so diverse, or if it was just like, no, these are just the kind of things we want to play, these are things that we've been thinking about, let's put these together. Because there are things that it's like, you know, talking about Convergence most recently, like Meds is a trip, and then you go into I can't remember, it was at Venice, and that's like a waltz, right? So
I got a funny story about Mez that I'll tell off air.
Okay,
just remind me.
I was about to say, like, please.
Yeah.
I was like, all right. But yeah, like, what's the inspiration for you guys? And I know the band varies slightly with each record, but what's the idea, like, when putting together a set for a record?
Well, it's a little. I think for the most part, it's a desire to just kind of document where we're at the moment, which it's not really. I wouldn't say it's like we're trying to like put together a specific vibe. I think it's just, I mean, the way that Daniel and I play, and the way that Daniel specifically Dufour approaches music is that, it's these specific people, and this like with the Standards record, like that, Jordan Burchell is an incredible guitar player in town. And he basically, a lot of those arrangements came from day of improvising, like, or not day of the recording, but like we'd have a gig, and Jordan would he has a really incredible talent of like coming up with vamps very quickly, and like little like figures that we can play over. And so a lot of those arrangements that we did on that record were basically just improvised on the gig, and we were like, hey, that's cool, let's remember that one, you know. So in that sense, it's very spur of the moment, very, you know, just figuring it out. And then other times, like on Silsby, the story behind that one is I have a buddy who's a great drummer, Andrew Stevens. He plays a lot of rock and roll stuff, but he plays in this band Lamelda. That's one of my favorite bands. They from Waco. Or no, Hannah, the singer, is from Silsby, Texas, but she lives in LA now. But her brother has a studio out there, and he had a deal for all the indie rock bands. He was like, hey, if you want to come record your live set, I'll do it for free.
Whoa.
And maybe I shouldn't have said that. I don't know if he has that deal anymore. But he offered basically just like, yeah, like if you want to come record, I'll do it for free. And so I was like, well, for us, that's a record.
Yeah, right.
You know, I mean, there was no prep or anything, obviously, and the only prep was just recording. And also Andrew, Tommy is his name, the engineer, or Hannah's brother, Tommy Reed, sweetest guy in the world. And we told him what we were going to do, and he was like, "Yeah, just come by and we'll record it." And I think he wanted to record it, but
Was
that was
that in Silsby?
Silsby, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting.
That record was a product of us having literally like the way we did it was it's Silsby, that town is like 2 hours outside of Houston. So what we did was we drove to Houston, played a gig at Cezanne, drove 2 hours outside of Houston, stayed in Silsby, Texas with Tommy, woke up early, woke up at like 10,
Yeah.
got sounds, recorded a record in like 3 hours,
Whoa.
basically, because that's all we had, because we had to pack up and drive back to Houston, play another gig at Cezanne, and then that night drive back to Austin.
Wow.
Which is so the product that was a product of like limited time. Also, Silsby is like a little tiny small town. Like literally while we were recording, I think the title track Silsby, which is the one that I wrote, which is just a vamp, you know.
Sure.
But like while we were recording that, I looked out the window and there were cows staring at me, you know, like, and I was just like, that's hilarious. What's happening? So that small, subdued kind of quiet sound on that record, I think comes from just the situation that we were in and the limited time we had. So it's like, okay, let's just relax and take our time.
Man, Do What You Do, I feel like is just this hauntingly like beautiful tune, man. And you know, I had all these ideas of what that title could mean. And I remember asking Dan, and he was like, well, I was just writing, you know, do what you do, you know, like I'm a drummer, I'm not really a composer, which I think everyone in town would challenge that, because
I know.
Like his playing is so dynamic that it is like he is composing on the spot. But yeah, I was just like, this is so great. And Silsby too, like I didn't know that you wrote that, and you said it's just a vamp, but that almost leads me into another thing that I wanted to talk about, that is it's a vamp, but it is fully deserving and demands the attention of the listener. It doesn't feel like it's just this kind of like, all right, and we're just like in this like limbo period that vamps can feel like. And I feel like the same kind of thing is true about like All the Things You Are starts with a bass solo, if I'm not mistaken. And then on your trio Monk show back in August, like I was just rewatching that last night and saw that, you know, you took like a pretty extended bass solo up top. And for a lot of people, that could almost feel like, oh, excuse me for that. Yeah, but for a lot of people that are not avid jazz listeners, you know, that can almost tune some people out if something is just kind of this very focused, prolonged thing. But your playing demands the attention of the listener, and not in an invasive way, but it is just so good that it's like, oh no, I'm really, really interested in what he's going to do next. And I think that's the ultimate goal of our craft, right? Is to make something that is maybe one of the harder sells just as easy as like a sell for a pop song, right? And just keeps you very invested. Maybe, I'm sure it varies from person to person, but for my experience of listening to that, I was like, man, I need to be listening to bass players in a whole nother way. Not that I didn't appreciate it before, but I really need to be like digging in and appreciating it just as much as somebody new to jazz would be appreciating a piano player's crazy bebop lines, you know? So anyways, for what it's worth.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I mean, it's, you know, it's something I'm still working on,
Yeah, sure.
you know, every day, like trying to figure out how to play something. I will say this, I think that's where a lot of my, I guess my influence from other genres comes through is writing those vampy stuff. Because I mean, like, you know, so much of pop music or rock or whatever is the same thing over and over again.
Sure.
And how do you make that interesting and compelling?
Right.
I mean, one of the ways you do that is you are very, very, very specific about your voicings.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, and I mean, in Silsby specifically, like when I showed Damien that line, he played something different. I was like, no, 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 no. You have to play this. This is the line. Don't do anything else until you start improvising a solo.
Right.
This is the line. Like that's how you do it with that. Otherwise, it's like you have to find a rhythmically like catchy phrase, like something that kind of like rhymes a little bit, you know, if that makes any sense. I think, I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert, and I'm no like. I mean, like the people who I love are like Robert Glasper. Like he plays, he'll like literally improvise lines that sound like samples or whatever. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's very kind of you to say, I guess, about the bass solo stuff. I try to make it interesting. Sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes I don't like it, but I mean, like the thing that I do is like I try to like just convey something or an emotion every note. You know, like I took a lesson with Joe Sanders, who's this incredible bass player, and he made me play the melody to a ballad. Was the first thing we did. And what he did was like, okay, play Darn That Dream. And I was like, okay. And then he was like, okay, now choose 3 emotions. And I was like, okay. And I don't know, I picked like melancholy, like sarcasm or sarcastically. I don't know if that's an emotion, but, and something else. And he's like, okay, now play the melody like that, you know?
Yeah.
Like he said, for each emotion. So you pick like 3 different things and you play the melody with that emotion. And it just rocked my world doing that. Cause I was like, oh, I hear it. What is going on? Like I'm able to hear exactly what I said I was trying to convey. And he was like, yeah, that's how you practice those things. You know, yeah, pretty wild. And I mean, that's like probably also an approach that singers might do. So maybe you can speak to that better. But yeah, I try to, on a good day, I'll be able to at least get one emotion across through a solo, you know, like that's all I try to do in those moments. But also bass solos are, I don't know, they can be boring, you know, and including my own solos. So like, if I'm going to do that, I used to do it way too much, but I try to only do it once per set, you know, once per gig, maybe.
One solo, one bass solo per gig?
No, one like extended solo like that.
Oh, okay.
Like up front. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Well, man, that what you shared, that I think is, this is going to sound cheesy, but I think that's a gift. Like, oh my God. Like, and even I was trying to think about that and I was like, wow, that, you know, I want to immediately like hit the shed. I want to like go over to the piano and be like, oh man, how do I like visualize these things different, not only from a solo perspective, but from like a head perspective, like you were talking about. And I was like, well, I was trying to like listen and also like consider at the same time, and thinking that singers, obviously we have a vehicle that conveys a certain emotion because we have the lyrics, right?
Good words, yeah.
And that's telling a story. But how much better would the tune and the not depiction of the tune, but the delivery of the tune be if singers were singing what wasn't on the page, you know?
Right.
Like, because we can sing these lyrics and they can be snapshots, but it's something that I try to teach my students, and I guess I just hadn't really made the full connection with this idiom as well, as like when you're singing lyrics, it needs to go far. I teach my musical theater students this. It needs to go far beyond like what you think this character is doing in this moment in time. Because when you think about like what actors are doing in movies, they're not like being like, okay, and I need to learn what this character is thinking in this scene and this scene and this scene. They really have to kind of become that person and live with that person for months, you know, in their brain to fully transform, so that way they can give like a convincing portrayal of who that person is, because we're only seeing a snapshot in the case of a film, 90 to 120 minutes of who this person is supposed to be, that is supposed to extend for an entire lifetime.
Sure.
You know, so wow, what a gift. I mean, there's no other way to say it.
Well, I mean, you know, thank you. You know, I don't think I have particularly supernatural talent, if that's what you meant by that. But you know, thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is just like, it's just work. That's all this shit is. It really is. It's just work and how much time you put into it.
Yeah.
And then you'll see the benefits. Then you'll see the rewards. I mean, it's like, there's no other way of doing. I mean, like, it reminds me of I saw Terrence Blanchard do a masterclass at UT one time, and he told this story about playing with Chick Corea, where he was like, man, Chick Corea, I played a week with him at a gig, and he played something different every single night.
Yeah.
Even though we were playing the same tunes, and I asked him at the end, I was like, how do you do that? And he literally just said, it's not magic.
Oh, whoa. Whoa.
You know?
Whoa.
And I was just like, whoa. I don't think Chick Corea was like trying to vibe him out or anything, because obviously he hired him for the gig, and, you know, Terrence Blanchard's amazing. But yeah, that really stuck with me for years. Oh, it's not magic. It's work. You know? I mean, like, that's all it is. Not to say that I've particularly worked harder than other people, because there are bass players who certainly have.
Sure.
But that's just something I'm trying to like think about and remind myself constantly. It's like, oh no, it's, you got to play almost every day, like, to keep this shit up. Like, that's the only way to really do it, you know?
Yeah. I'm also curious what you think about this. I think there's a real debate to be had, and not that it has not already been had. I mean, I feel like it's like a thing that we toil over, but the idea of like putting in the work and practicing, and what split that is of actually being on your instrument and just listening, you know, because there are certain times where, you know, David Mescatique and I are about to go, he's about to do another record, and I'm doing a thing on there. And he was like, well, hey, what if we add like another tune in there? What if we do something like this? And I was like, okay, well, like, let me shed those changes, because like I'd probably take a solo on one. And, you know, just like by playing the chords and really like focusing on each change and being like, okay, what do I hear in this? Just being a little bit more physically on the piano, right? And that helped immensely. But then I remember 3 days later, I hit this huge wall, and I felt like I was listening to the same stuff, and I just like couldn't think of anything original. So then I put on Freddie Hubbard's The Body and the Soul record, and I went on a run. And I just all of a sudden could hear, that was a record I'd been waiting to get around to. And then I was like, holy shit, I can just hear like all this other stuff. And I think it was just a matter of just like osmosis, like of just listening and hearing and being like, oh, I would have never thought to do that kind of line, or I would, oh, there's so much more simple stuff that I can do. Whereas I was trying to fit a bunch of heady stuff into a small amount of space, you know, relatively. So where do you lie on that spectrum of like putting in the time on the instrument, or putting in the time just listening and trying to absorb?
I mean, it's both. Like, I have to practice. The thing I've been doing lately is like active listening, you know, like every morning I'll either put on a record or at least a tune, you know, that I'm trying to like get in my brain, or a feel or something, and like think about. Like yesterday I was listening to Roll Call, that Hank Mobley record.
Okay.
Great record, but it's Paul Chambers and Art Blakey. And I mean, Art Blakey played the scariest shit I've ever heard in my entire life on that. I think it's Roll Call. I feel like that's right. But sorry, I don't want to look at my phone to find it out. But yeah, I mean, it is. It's both. It really is. I mean, I had a recording session with Aubrey Logan like a month ago that was great, and the way I prepared for it was, well, I had like a specific player in mind. I was like, okay, like this is the kind of style, this is like the vibe I think it is, you know. And I got that from like, that's not an original concept. Like Tim LaFave told me that recently. He was like, yeah, like for every recording session or every tune, I have like a specific player in mind, and it usually kind of helps get ideas out easier if I'm kind of thinking about someone else. But like for this record with Aubrey, I practiced like every day, like at least 4 hours, sometimes more, or, you know, or if not 4 hours, then I was like very specific about what I was doing.
Sure.
And then I listened to Paul Chambers. I had to drive back from Memphis to Austin for this recording session. And it's like, that's a 9-hour drive. And I listened to Paul Chambers almost the entire way.
Yeah.
Just different recordings, different stuff. And it helps. Like I felt like I had, you know, gotten that into my brain. So I guess I'm really not like shedding any more light onto that. I'm just confirming that, yes, it is both.
Sure.
I don't think there's any way around. I mean, it's the same thing with like when I was in school, like talking to like classical musicians sometimes, not to dump on classical musicians, but like they would talk to me about what they were listening to, and I kind of always wanted to be like, well, are you listening to classical music? Like, is this something you're interested in? Because like at the time I was like, I was only listening to jazz. I was like a jazz snob, just because it's like, I'm here, I'm going to do this. And like, I love jazz and I love doing this. So like, I'm going to listen to as much music as I possibly can. I mean, I would go to the library and like steal discs. You know, back when computers had CD players in them, I would like go in and like rip. I probably shouldn't say that. It's incriminating. Everyone was doing it though.
He was joking.
Yeah, I'm joking. Right? Yeah, it's parody. Yeah, I would jokingly rip all the tunes off of an Art Blakey recording. Well, I mean, you know, that's what I was doing. So like,
sure.
I mean, you'll notice if you spend one time with one person or one musician and like spend time thinking about where they're placing the beat, how they phrase things musically, like what notes they're playing, how they got an idea, like where it came from, like from someone else in the band, it's just going to happen. It's just going to like osmosis itself into you.
Yeah.
So really the trick is to be able to do that with as many musicians as possible so that no one knows where your influences are coming from, you know?
Yeah, for sure. How do you feel like playing with a consistent group affects the freshness or staleness of the stuff that you can play with? Because like I love playing with a consistent group because of the fact that like, and I think one of the prime examples of that in town is you guys, like you and Jordan and Dan and Sean Giddings and Damien. Like no matter what faction of it, or Carter Arrington too, no matter what faction of the group it is that's playing, like it is so very evident that you guys have A, been playing together for a long time, and B, know each other so well, if not personally as musicians, just really, really know each other and like how to play to each other's strengths. So I love playing with a consistent group.
Yeah.
Because it allows for that kind of unspeakable bond. But at the same time, when somebody is like, oh man, I'm so sorry, I was already booked for this date, you know, such and such is available, or I call somebody and then have them in, it's like, oh, whoa, here's like a new factor. And it like caused me to think about things that I'd never thought about before. So playing with a consistent group, how do you feel like that affects like your growth as a musician, developing that bond?
I mean, it's a lot of things. Like I think in a way your playing becomes a little bit more specific.
Mm-hmm.
before the pandemic, I mean, I was playing with Kevin Lovejoy and Daniel every Sunday night at once at a different venue, once at another place, or sorry, every Sunday except for the last Sunday we would play at Lambert's, and the last Sunday we would play at Elephant Room.
Okay.
And like, I think then my tastes and things I would play, I mean, not only would we just get tighter as a group, we would like be able to osmosis and stuff, but like just personally, I felt like my playing got a little bit more specific. Like I felt like I was sometimes like playing to that group, which is a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, like, it was a little bit more. It wasn't necessarily so. I wasn't trying to do that outright. Like it wasn't a thing that I was like trying to think about and do, but it's just something I think that happened.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, is that like you're playing just kind of like molds into the musical situation you're in. The other thing I think is that, I mean, yeah, like especially as a bass player and a drummer, like playing with the same people, like that's how you get good.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, like I definitely got better as a bass player playing with Danny DeFore just because he demands so much.
Yeah.
And he's very like he's very powerful force of the set. So like you're just playing with people who are better than you is gonna make you better, obviously. But like especially bass player and drummer relationship, it's like you're never gonna feel what it feels like to play with a really killing feel and a really great time, and like unless you play with someone a lot, you know.
Yeah. Right.
That's the way to do it. I mean, sometimes you're just going to find freak occurrences where you just immediately are able to lock in with someone.
Yeah.
That's happened a few times. I mean, like Daniel Dufour is one of those people that I was just pretty immediately had to lock in with. Jeff Olson, great drummer in town. Greg Clifford.
Yeah.
All those guys have different bags, you know, and I kind of, I mold to play with them or each of them, but yeah, you're just never going to be able to feel a good feel like that, I think, unless you are, I mean, A, playing with the right person, and B, have a lot of time with them, you know?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do prefer, I don't really get too bogged down on like keeping it fresh with people. I think a part of that is because of some of the people I play with have that particular ethos about them anyway, where they try to keep things just fresh, just out of sheer necessity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I play with so many people anyway too. I'm a bass player, so like that doesn't really come up for me very often when I'm thinking about who I'm playing with. Like maybe one of the, you know, I mean, maybe I won't want to play with some people that I get hired to play with, which is fine. But that also brings its own set of challenges and things I can learn from the situation, which that's hard to do, especially if you're gigging all the time like I was before COVID. But now every gig I get is an opportunity.
Sure,
You know?
sure. Well, it's kind of the idea of, you know, when we are playing 20, 25 nights a month, you know, here in town, there are inevitably gigs where we're just in the middle of it and we're like,
I want to go home.
Yeah, what time, you know, and like, what am I going to get to eat after this? I didn't get to eat before this. Like, I'm over it, you know, like I'm just going to play standard and it's going to be out. And then now that like gigs are gone well, not gone, but like more scarce until things get a little bit more under control, you do really stop to like smell the roses, even on like what you might have considered to be like a shitty gig before. You're like, nope, this is really great, because I realized that Ben Treesh was saying this to me the other day. He was like, I did not realize how cushy a spot we all lived in, where we were able to complain about playing music for a living, you know, from time to
dude,
time.
I mean, that's the Austin curse though. Like, I mean, you know, I've spent 10 years in Austin now, and it's like it's hilarious to me sometimes, like how Austin musicians just take it for granted.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you go to New York or you go to like New Orleans. New Orleans is a separate case, I think, but you can't really say that about a lot of places where you can comfortably make a living playing music. You just can't. I mean, Austin is one of the only places you can do that. But it also sucks. And I'm saying that for anyone who is thinking of moving here. Don't move here, especially if you play bass.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's really special. Like, I mean, I've had plenty of arguments with people about this, and I stand by it still to this day. It's like, no, this is crazy special, and we should all not take it for granted, because you cannot do this in like just anywhere.
Yeah. Specifically with our genre too. Like,
specifically with our genre. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't do it with, I mean, like, yeah, I'm very lucky in that I play bass and I get called for a lot of stuff, but I'm lucky in that I am allowed financially and energy wise and just everything. I'm allowed and able to play as many different genres as I do.
Yeah.
Because you can't do that in New York or like LA. Most of those guys just stick to one thing, which you're very lucky to do. But yeah, it's hard, man. It's hard out there.
Yeah. Well, man, I want to ask you what you're listening to and what you would suggest people to go and listen to. Like, as soon as this is over, like if there's like a record or two or three that you're like, go check this out now. Boom.
Well, I'll give you two because the theme of this episode has been how diverse I am musically. The record that kind of freaked me out was the Phoebe Bridgers record. Have you checked her out?
I have checked her out, but not like excessively. It's like, oh, who's this? This is cool. Phoebe Bridgers.
She came out with a record last year called Punisher that I ate up. It's a very sad record. It's very slow, but the production is incredible. The lyrics are heart-wrenching. The melodies are just soaring and unbelievable. That record is amazing. I don't know how else to put it. Yeah, it really freaks me out. And then lately I've been listening to I'm sorry, I get freaked out. I get a little nervous whenever people ask me this question because I'm like, what have I been listening to? I don't know. I always just forget. But there's this, Warren Marsh?
I don't.
He's a sax player. He's like kind of the New York guy. But he did a record with Paul Chambers and Paul Motion, just trio on most of it. There's a piano player on a couple tracks, and I feel really bad. I don't know the piano player right now, but it's his like self-titled record. It's just called Warren Marsh.
Okay.
And that record to me it's just amazing because you get to hear Paul Chambers just absolutely slay, and also played with Paul Motion, which is like not really two people you would think would play together that often, but they sound amazing and wild together. Yeah, that's a good one. They're like Yardbird Suite, and it's like a bop like kind of thing. And Paul Motion is playing like, he's playing like he's doing traditional jazz shit, but it's like it's just a little bit different. It's weird. It's cool. Man. There's actually, now that it made me think of another record that kind of freaked me out was that Larry Golding's Larry Grenadier Paul Motion record. I think it's called Awakening. I'm looking it up right now because I'm terrible. Awareness. I was close. That record is awesome. And now that we're talking about Larry Golding's, Music from the Front Room is one of my favorite recordings of all time. It's him and Jay Belrose and David Pilch. and they just play in Larry Golding's living room, and they just absolutely kill it. It's so good.
Man, amazing. Whenever you were talking about, different genre stuff, have you checked out stuff by Moses Sumney?
Yeah, I have. Moses Sumney's great. Yeah.
That dude, like his record from a few years ago, Aromanticism, and then the 2-part record he just put out, which is called Gray, is just like, I believe it's called Gray. Yeah. Gray Part 1 and Part 2, dude, just like rocks my world. Like that, like I will venture out and listen to some like indie stuff whenever I'm just kind of like a little overwhelmed with jazz, and I just need like a little bit of a break. And it's usually like that and like Sufjan Stevens and stuff like that, that I just feel like has the same, I think I'm drawn to like intent, and like being very intentional, not to bag on all like a bunch of other genres or anything like that. But I feel like specifically with those guys there, and The Tallest Man on Earth, there is just like this intent that is like, I believe so deeply in this music, and it almost feels like therapy for them, which by extension feels like such an honest, open, genuine, like revealing of them as people. And I feel like that is kind of very similar to the jazz idiom of just like kind of all leaving it all on the stage, and whatever happens. So yeah,
you should listen to Blake Mills. Blake Mills?
I don't know Blake Mills.
You should listen to that today. Blake, his record Mutable Set came out last year too, beginning of the last year. And Blake Mills is like an incredible producer. I mean, he's produced he's young. He's also like mid-30s. I hate him. He's like a super young guy, and he's produced like Bob Dylan. He produced Bob Dylan's new record,
Whoa.
Yeah, he's incredible. And he's an incredible guitar player too. But he like came out with this new record that's like almost no guitar. It's like piano and him singing. And it sounds like far out Randy Newman. It's so good. It's amazing.
In the interest of time, what's coming, the last question, because you had an isolated one for the holiday special. But man, Gig from Hell, I want to know. What's been going on?
Gig from Hell. I forgot that you asked this, and I didn't come prepared.
It's almost my favorite though when people have to just like immediately, it's like whatever comes to your mind, it's like boom.
There's like one that that I have kind of in my brain. There's one that I played in November of 2019, where it was like a wedding set, and like they asked us to play, like it was this couple, the couple who asked us was this like lesbian couple. They weren't getting married, but it was one of the woman's like brother or something was getting married, and they asked us to play, and it was this huge outdoor venue, and they asked like, not professional wedding band people, but like party band people, that some people I know in town who were great, incredible musicians, but we all got asked to play this gig, and it was like just like I think what they really wanted was like super pro like wedding band people, but they didn't know what they got, and so we played this gig, and like we had to set up sound for like the ceremony itself, and like we rented gear and everything, and not to say that these people aren't professionals, sorry, that's not what I'm implying.
No.
It's just that they have a different bag. And we rented all this sound gear, and like they had like a little microphone they were using, and there was like a super gusty wind, and like old people were coming up to us and being like, "Why is it so loud? There's too much wind. You need to fix this." It's like, we can't do anything. What do you want from us? And then like they asked us the couple asked us to play all these tunes, like wedding band tunes, and they were like, "We want to dance." It's like, okay, we worked up a set, man. Like we you know, we did like Flashlight, we did like all the classic like wedding band tunes.
Yeah.
And like we get there and we're like, they're not gonna like this at all. It's like a country gig. Like these people were like country people.
Oh no.
Like, but the people who hired us, the couple wanted us to play these tunes, and like the whole time, no one danced. I felt like I was like being like, it was so uncomfortable. It was the most uncomfortable I've ever been at a wedding. Usually I'm fine. Like, you know, I get uncomfortable sometimes when like people ask like jazz trios to play wedding, like dance wedding things. Cause I'm like, I don't know if that's what you want, you know, but okay. But this was like, no, we're playing dance music. This is like specifically to dance to. No one was dancing. Everyone just kept coming up and being like, hey, y'all know any country tunes?
Oh,
You know, and like asking constantly the whole time. And then at the end of it, my iPad fell off and broke, you know?
Oh man.
Like it was the absolute worst. And like we had to rehearse like 5 times. Like all this effort was put in, and this gig was just like, dude, this is horrendous, you know?
Oh man.
And I remember specifically the leader was very beleaguered and angry. And at the end, he just came up and said, all right, Sam, we're never going to talk about this again, okay? All right, we're not going to talk about it.
Until now.
Yeah, until now. Well, I didn't say any names, so they can't they can't get mad at me for telling the story again.
That's fair. Man, very, very briefly, I had because in the same kind of like similar situation of like someone hires you and you think this is what they want to hear, like they give you like a specific thing of like what they want to hear, and then guests being like rather unruly. I played this wedding a couple years ago where it was a big band gig, and they like we usually tell like our clients like pick 10 songs that you like and 10 songs that you don't like, and then we'll curate the set rather than being like giving you creative control, because then it's just like so stifling and it opens up Pandora's box, as I'm sure you know. So we did specifically though for this one, we like curated a set and sent it to them ahead of time because they were just like the nicest people in the world, and we were like, you know what, I'm feeling nice, whatever. And we get to the gig and we're like 3 or 4 songs in, and the grandmother of the groom comes up, and she's like this small, short, elderly lady, and she just starts like screaming in my face and goes, waltz, waltz. Whoa! And just like it's a 15-piece big band with a drummer who like was packing a punch that night too. Like he was being pretty loud like for the room, but like amazing drummer. And I could like hear her like audibly. And she just is screaming in my face. And then I was like, yeah, we'll make sure we'll get around to it, because we did have some coming up. And after the next tune starts, she's just sitting there, like, or standing there front and center, and like everyone's dancing around her, and she's just going like this. And then I kick off the next tune, which is like The Way You Look Tonight or something like that. And she goes, waltz? Like, just like, because she thought that we were gonna, and like on the solo, or like on the band solo section, the soli, I like stepped down and I was like, ma'am, we're gonna make sure to play it. Like, we're gonna play a waltz for you, but it's gonna be in a few tunes. And she was like, do you even know how to play a waltz? And I was like, yes.
No, ma'am, I do not.
Yeah, I was like,
I've never played one in my life.
And she goes, 1, 2, 3.
I love that.
I was like, yes, ma'am, like we're getting around to it. And then she grabs my arm, and there's a theme. I told you that, like there's a theme of people grabbing my arm, which I don't understand. And she goes, are you even a Christian? And I was like,
so sick, dude.
I was like,
so sick.
What? And she
that's right, because you're not playing you're playing the devil's music backbeats, you know?
I never thought about it that way. Wow.
That sounds like some bullshit, like right winger. Sorry, I'm getting. Oh, never mind. Cut that. I'm getting mean. That's very funny. That's okay. We can cut that. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Man, it was just a wild experience. And then I remember the groom coming up to me and the father of the groom who was cutting the check at the end of the night. And I was so mortified because she left early. She left the wedding because she was so pissed, which is crazy to me that she leaves her grandson's wedding because she's so mad that the band didn't play a waltz. And I see her in the back, like getting the coordinator and going like, these guys. And the coordinator comes up to me and she was like, well, you made like Elaine really like upset, you know? And I was like, I'm sorry. I mean, like we have this curated set. And they were like, no. She's like been a pain in our ass like the whole time. And at the end of the night, the father of the groom, who keep in mind, this is his mom, comes up to me and I'm like, and this dude is like handlebar mustache, like big dude. And I'm like pretty intimidated that he's just going to give me a stern talking to, that I like ruined the wedding for his mom. And he comes up and starts writing the check and he's like, how'd you guys have? You guys have a good time? And I was like, yes, sir. We had a great time. It was a lot of fun. And I was like, hey, I just want to apologize, like elephant in the room. I know that there was, you know, some animosity that happened between, and he was like, oh yeah, my mom. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, yeah, you pissed her off. So it was a job well done. And then, and then like sent me on my way and like gave me this big handshake and like shoulder grab and was like, great job. It was a great time. And then left.
That's awesome. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
It was like one of those, it was like a gig from hell turned like great. Just really great experience. So
that's awesome.
Anyways.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Well, Sam, man, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. It really is like a true pleasure to talk to you. You're just the nicest guy, great conversation. And man, I'm going to immediately hit the shed and start thinking about 3 emotions for every tune.
Well, likewise. Thank you, Christian. This was really fun.
Of course. All right, man. I will see you soon.
Yeah.
Everyone go check out sampanky.bandcamp.com. Correct?
Yes.
And support the new releases, Convergence, Silsby, Distance, Standards.
Yes.
Right? Awesome. Sweet. All right, Sam, I'll talk to you soon. Peace.
Sounds good.
Bye.